Regret of the final words. Christopher sat with his hands bound in a cramped interrogation room, its walls a pale shade lit by flickering overhead lights. He shivered as a cold draft blew in, his anxious gaze searching for any sign of escape. Only 2 days earlier, he had been lost in trivial thoughts, never imagining that careless words would land him in this desolate place. Eleanor entered with measured steps, her eyes cool and calculating. She set a thin file on the table as if to show she already had all the evidence she needed. At first, she said nothing, making Christopher's heart pound violently. For a moment, he even forgot to breathe, afraid to utter a single syllable. It struck him that maybe silence was his only salvation. But Eleanor's watchful eyes awakened in him the urge to defend the last vestiges of his dignity. At last, she cut through the silence with a predictable question. "Do you know why you're here?" Christopher tried to respond, but his lips were dry with fear. After a moment of hesitation, he managed to say, "Maybe because of something I said, something poorly timed." Eleanor blinked, studying his panicked face. She seemed to be waiting for him to break down and spill even more. And even though Christopher knew that any word he spoke could be fatal, he found himself uttering a forbidden name, Lorenzo. A slight twitch appeared at the corner of Eleanor's mouth when she heard the name. It was as though that name itself held the keys to a deep mystery. Christopher immediately stopped talking. In that pause, he realized he was doomed whether he spoke up or kept silent. He wondered inwardly, how did my own tongue become the trap they set for me? Memories swirled in Christopher's mind, showing Jeremy's perpetually smiling face. It had been that evening at a stylish cafe, bathed in soft music, when Jeremy approached with a confident, persuasive grin. "Tell me, man, I've heard you're close to some powerful businessman. Isn't Lorenzo among them?" Back then, Christopher felt a quiet pride in being the center of his old friend's attention. He wanted to impress him a little, so he began describing to Jeremy what he'd heard of major, upcoming projects and investments that could change the city's landscape. He failed to notice the gleam in Jeremy's eyes when he mentioned Lorenzo, nor did he realize he might be dragging himself into a web of confessions. The more Christopher talked eagerly, the more Jeremy's silence became unsettling. But Christopher mistook his friend's quietness for awe. And as the conversation wore on, Christopher's desire to show off his knowledge grew, leading him to name other important figures, mentioning them casually, believing he was sharing a secret between friends. It was only minutes later that Jeremy discreetly picked up his phone, as if responding to an urgent call. When the meeting ended, Jeremy left, having effortlessly extracted confidential details from Christopher. Just hours afterward, Christopher received a cryptic message on his phone. "Watch your words, someone is listening." Only then did he feel a chill of danger, but by then it seemed it was far too late. The next day, Eleanor returned to resume her interrogation. She placed some papers in front of Christopher, containing shocking details: private meetings, names, dates, and locations. How had all this information made its way into an official file? In a brief flash, he recalled that evening with Jeremy and the careless talk that slipped out. Eleanor's gaze probed his eyes, as if seeing a mixture of guilt and turmoil. She said calmly, "Where did you get such exclusive information?" Christopher tried to summon his courage, recalling his father's old advice. One surrounded by suspicion, say nothing. But he betrayed that advice and replied, "It all happened by chance. Pure coincidence." Eleanor narrowed her eyes, shaking her head. "I don't think coincidence explains how detailed this is." A moment of silence passed between them. Christopher felt a splitting headache, and words crept from his mouth against his will. "Believe me, I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove that I matter." He stopped abruptly, as if confessing a deep sin. Eleanor motioned toward a man standing at the doorway, who stepped forward and handed her what looked like a small recording device. She pressed play, and Christopher's own reckless voice poured from the speaker, accompanied by Jeremy's laughter in the background. He felt the blade of truth cutting through his silence. "So that's how they trapped me." Elsewhere in the city, Lorenzo sat in a spacious office lined with artwork and subdued lighting. He appeared to be a man of few words, who rarely revealed his thoughts, unlike his victims, whom he lured into talking. Jeremy stood before him, delivering what seemed like a final report. "I've obtained enough of Christopher's confessions. The recordings are ready, and..." Lorenzo lifted his hand, signaling him to stop. He studied Jeremy's eager expression, then spoke with chilling composure. "The leaked information is more dangerous than I expected. If it falls into the wrong hands, we'll be forced to shut the whole file." The echo of those words resounded in Jeremy's mind. Shutting the file often meant disposing of witnesses. Despite his own anxiety, Jeremy tried to hide his unease. "Does Christopher's fate really concern us? The important thing is..." Lorenzo turned his gaze briefly to the window, as though seeing the future beyond the glass. "The important thing is that he never utters another word. That man doesn't know how to keep quiet." Jeremy felt a jolt in his chest. He had been the one to coax Christopher into confessing, but now he feared repercussions if the plan unraveled beyond Lorenzo's control. He murmured, "But Eleanor has stepped in. She's trying to uncover the truth." Lorenzo fixed him with a steely stare and ended calmly, "The truth. We're the ones who write it. We just need to lock every door to it, but..." Christopher found himself in a dim, cramped room with only a table and 2 chairs. He sat there, bracing for Lorenzo's entrance. The door opened quietly, revealing a man wreathed in an aura of mystery, his expression nearly devoid of emotion. A brief exchange made Christopher realize Lorenzo had meticulously prepared everything to entrap him, and not a single word would be wasted. In a low voice, Lorenzo said, "Do you know the one thing you never understood?" Christopher stared at him nervously. "What is it?" Lorenzo continued, "That words are power, just like money or authority. But it's a two-edged weapon, and you handed all your weapons over to me when you freely chatted with Jeremy." Christopher wanted to defend himself, yet he felt a prickling in his throat. Every sentence he spoke might incriminate him further. He recalled how keen he had been to flaunt his insider knowledge, naively telling secrets to an unfaithful ear. A storm of anger and fear churned inside him. "I didn't realize I was in a trap." Lorenzo's slight smirk curled. "That's the point of a trap, my friend, that you only recognize it once you're snared." Before he could say more, Eleanor suddenly entered with purposeful strides. The entire scene shifted. Lorenzo showed a hint of surprise, and Christopher couldn't grasp what was happening. Eleanor said, "Oh, I have orders from above. No one leaves this room until the deal is done." Christopher and Lorenzo exchanged tense looks, while Eleanor's gaze hinted at something deeper than anyone had guessed. The three of them faced each other around the table, Lorenzo with his habitual coolness, Eleanor with her penetrating stare, and Christopher with trembling lips that had brought him to the brink of destruction. Eleanor placed the recording device before them and pressed play. Christopher's and Jeremy's voices echoed from that cafe conversation, interwoven with prominent names and unsettling secrets. Eleanor addressed Lorenzo. "Christopher will survive if he keeps quiet. I'll handle what I heard in a way that protects all our interests. But there's one condition." She paused, prompting Lorenzo to watch her closely. Christopher spoke up in despair. "I'll do whatever you want, just don't hurt me." Lorenzo interrupted with a wry tone. "I'm giving you a choice. Disappear or remain, with every breath stifled forever." Eleanor turned off the device and spoke sternly. "The official report I have will be closed. Christopher will remain bound to silence, and Lorenzo will stay in the shadows, wielding his influence. As for you, Christopher, you've handed them everything they need to destroy you, but I'm giving you a single chance." Christopher stammered. "A chance," she replied calmly. "If you want to live, stay silent. That silence is the price of keeping your head." He felt a chilling dread sink in, realizing his entire life had become a grand prison of fear and doubt. Just before he was led out of the room, Eleanor whispered in his ear, "Sometimes one word is enough to bring down a world. Never forget that." The door opened, and Christopher walked away, tears of regret still wet on his cheeks. He left behind the warped dreams of pride and thrill, understanding that his only salvation lay in withholding secrets. In that moment, he learned the most valuable lesson of his life. Never speak words that can destroy you, because mouths don't spare their owners once the truth slips out in a moment of vanity. The moral of the story, from a deep psychological and philosophical perspective: this tale shows that words wield a power akin to a double-edged sword. When we seek to assert our presence through excessive talk, we unwittingly become captives of our own statements. Our words turn into a key that flings open the doors of our secrets. The motive behind such over-talking often stems from psychological drives: the desire for recognition, social acceptance, or boasting of our knowledge. All are human needs, yet in a moment of vanity, they may flip into a trap that devours the speaker. On a deeper level, the story reveals that we are locked in a perpetual struggle between our need for self-expression and our fear of exposing our vulnerabilities. When anxiety or ambition envelops us, we may utter what we cannot take back. Philosophically, regret of the final words reminds us that sometimes we bear the burden of the meaning of our words, not just their surface. They are more than tools of communication. They are extensions of our identity and will. Thus, when awareness fades or desire prevails, words become a fire that consumes the trust and relationships we have built. In the end, wisdom lies in recognizing the boundary between silence and speech. A certain measure of silence can protect us from the uproar of regret, while giving in to the urge to speak out can lead to dire consequences. It is not a call for absolute silence, but rather for genuine awareness of what we say, for in a single moment of confusion, one word can turn into a new identity we carry forever.